make sure you stay in good conversation. You gotta tune in to Coffee and Conversation with Collette, that's me, Thursday mornings from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. on the only station, WHPR TV 33. See you soon.
Rise and shine, up and at 'em. It's an amazing new day. You're officially tuned in to Coffee and Conversation with Collette. And I'm Collette, and y'all know I do my curtsy, because that's what I do. It'll be great one day when I'm going to stand up and have a dress and do a curtsy so you actually really see how the curtsy is supposed to take place. You know, because that's a little old school. That's a, kind of like the etiquette type of thing. You do a curtsy, But it's okay. You get the point. It's the reverence that I have, because what do I say? I know that you could be anywhere, watching any type of programming, hoping to contribute to the conversation, but you made the choice to tune into us, WHPS TV 33, or whether Comcast 91, or Roku, or live stream, but you're here. You're right here. And you're ready to engage, because you know the conversation is going to what? Educate, enlighten, and empower. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you all to engage, indulge me for a little bit, because there were some technical difficulties yesterday, and I got so many calls offline, off air, and that you really wanted to revisit the conversation from yesterday. And since we're in our 2-hour space, normally what we do is take the conversation from yesterday and then parlay it into today, and I'll start off with a different segment. But today, I'm going to revisit the conversation in the first hour of what happened yesterday to set the tone for the second hour and for anything else that you want to talk about, because I believe that the conversation is relevant in all aspects of our life. Let me just say that. And I believe that what we do here, the conversations that we have here, we are committed to making sure that we have the right type of information, that we're having the real conversations so that we can make the best decisions. And at the end of the day, as was quoted yesterday, and you're going to get that quote, it is not what we want it to be, but what it is. Because a lot of times we live in a space where we're creating all of our narratives. You always hear me talk about shaping your narrative. We create all of our narratives based on what we think. What we think it should be, how we think people should act, what we think people should do. I mean, I'm guilty of it all the time. It's like, oh, well, if I do this, then they should do this. Well, no, not necessarily, because A, they might not even know, might not even think that way, might not even process that way, might not even understand things to be that way. But at the end of the day, we move and create decisions and life decisions based on what we think it should be versus what it is. And so the world that we live in right now is exactly what it is. And so I'm going to challenge us that if we indeed take it exactly for what it is, we understand it exactly for what it is and the people in it, especially those that we call leaders, what do? What does that look like for us? And so I asked us yesterday, does character matter in leadership? And I want that to sink in a little bit with you. Does character matter? And I'm going to give you the definition, the Webster's definition of character, which states it is a noun, the mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual. Synonyms are integrity, honor, moral strength, uprightness, fortitude, backbone, willpower, reputation. And so when you think about character, does it matter? And so then what I asked us, I presented some individuals, and we were able to engage in some scenarios specific to those individuals. So I mentioned, of course, the mayor of Detroit, Mike Duggan, and what is happening with this bout, if you will, back and forth with the businessman Carmack, who has gone through great lengths to have an investigator, to be able to get footage, to be able to air it downtown on the big jumbo screen, and what he believes as some very questionable behaviors, perhaps with a young lady that is not his wife. And what does that look like in the character of the man that is supposed to be the administrator for the city of Detroit? And if you take exception to that. And then I asked that if indeed we're very quiet about it, that we're not really having the conversations, what's the difference with that scenario and, remember, Mayor Kwame Malik Kilpatrick? And some people said, well, Collette, it's not that he was convicted and Kwame lied because of it, and then it unearthed all these other things. But we're talking about your character. So if indeed it started with this type of behavior, maybe proven or unproven, it's the conversation. Because remember, what is it that we always talk about? It doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It's what was created as the conversation that gives life. And so I want us to think about that and what that looks like. And then I'm going to throw in who? Cindy Hyde Smith. If you all don't know, she was just elected the first woman to Congress out of Mississippi. She defeated Democrat Mike Epps. I need to understand how that happened. I need to understand in Mississippi how a white woman who was noted in interviews and speaking to people made certain gestures about, if there was a town lynching, you need to invite me. I'd be the first one there. She attended segregationist schools. Her children, she put in segregation schools, and she is now the representative for Mississippi. Character. So then you wonder, how does that impact her leadership, her character? She's showing you who she is. And then I threw in there our own Detroit Council President, Brenda Jones. I asked you all, we've been having the ongoing conversations about the conversation around the ethical committee approving her ability to be able to serve in Congress while seated as a Detroit City Council member. And I presented to you an article yesterday that said that at this point, the ethics committee didn't find an issue with it. It wasn't a problem. And then later on, further in the evening on yesterday, she was sworn in. So Jones was sworn into Congress after the deal was reached. And so I'm asking you, if we talk about character, do you have an issue with that? Does that say something to you about her? Do you question how in this window she's sworn in as a congressional person and city council is on break? So they're suggesting that she's not going to really be functioning any role for city council for Detroit. But of course, at the Capitol, they're on break too. So she's not going to be really functioning in any effective capacity there either. But she's getting a check. And so it is what it is, only to be replaced at the beginning of the year by Representative Rashida Tlaib. Do you have a problem with that? Because I want to know, in the midst of all these dealings and conversations and meetings as it pertains to what it looks like for the congressional seat, are you working on behalf of the citizens of City of Detroit? What's going on with that? Does that say something about your character? And then I threw out there the whole notion, we had an article about Representative Betty Cook Scott, and that because she lost to Mrs. Chang, that she has yet to have appeared up in Lansing to fulfill her duties still as a current city representative. Because the article alludes to the fact that maybe she was mad, she's upset, so she's just chosen not to show up, but then she still gets a check. Does that speak to the character? And then I presented to us our own Donald Trump, President Trump. And everything that he is suggesting, and specifically as it pertains to GM and this whole big piece about layoffs and what it looks like, and especially folks just coming out of the bailout and what that deal looks like. And so Trump said, well, guess what? I'm going to remove the monies that I had allocated for electric car project because you're not committed to jobs here. You're taking jobs away. And so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to hold that up against you, and that's just going to be the way that it is. Does that speak to his character? Do you agree with that? And so those are just some of the scenarios. I mean, we can go on and on about issues that are consistently coming up that make you look at people sideways. Or maybe you should look at them sideways. But do we? And does it matter? Because I've never heard this type of hush around the city, especially as it pertains to the situation with Mayor Mike Duggan. I know Kwame, we talked about it all day, every day. It was on news cycles all day, every day. People got awards, it seems, on talking about him and what was happening with him. And so I'm just asking, do you relate the two? And if you don't, if you never thought about it that way, then I'm going to help you out this morning, because Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli, you all have heard of him, the author of specifically two great works, The Prince is one of them, and he talks about the political theory. And that theory is such that you cannot have favorable outcomes. You cannot be an effective leader without having dishonesty in you, without having some level of criminality in you. And then at the end of the day, he makes an amazing correlation with that of the church, the moral components of the church, specifically the Catholic Church. But you all know one of the biggest powerhouses in the world is the Vatican. It's the Catholic Church. But there's supposed to be a separation between church and state. But you actually believe what is indoctrinated in you with regards to religion doesn't have an impact in how you think, how you process, specifically if you're a legislator, how you create policy and how you think and assess policy as it relates to people. There has to be a direct correlation, because your moral essence is who you are. If you have no morals as a part of your character, then you can suggest perhaps that you're going to sit and cut health care for individuals. You're going to suggest that the school system can be failing and the children have no options, and it's okay that buildings are filled with lead and the water isn't appropriate. You can suggest that it's okay that people lost their homes under a foreclosure crisis that should never have existed, because the leadership should have known better to be able to adjust the property taxes with regards to the value of the home so people wouldn't lose their homes, and they didn't. And all of that's gone hush. But if you don't think, you don't know. So then you should start questioning yourself. Well, if I am not questioning these things because of lack of information on my part, I'm ignorant to it, then how do I make the best decisions? Because people can tell me anything. So you're the perfect Pinocchio to the Geppetto. So what I'm going to do this morning, we're going to go to this great clip. It's about 4.5 minutes with Machiavelli. I'm going to give you an overview about how you can be effective in leadership. And then I want to know what you think. I want to know if you agree. I want to know if you have an issue with character. And so before we do that, I want to give us a quote. And this quote, I'm going to tell you beforehand, is from one of our commanders-in-chief, Norman Schwarzkopf. He was a United States Army general. He served as commander-in-chief of Central Command under the Gulf War. And he states, leadership is a potent combination of strategy and character. But if you must be without one, be without the strategy. Let me give it to you again. I want you to get that. I want you to really think about that. He states, quote, leadership is a potent combination of strategy and character. But if you must be without one, be without the strategy. So he's stressing the importance of character, because someone's character will put people in jeopardy and say that that's just surplus. So if they perish in a war, it was for the good of the group. But if I don't know who you are, if I don't understand your character, you'll send people to war. You'll start issues that really aren't relevant to the people, but to the bottom line, which is revenue, which is money. Or to show some type of influence of power, so to create fear. But you will sit and put everyone's lives at risk and even cause people's lives to be taken because you want to prove a point, because that's a form of your leadership. Do y'all get where we're going? And we can talk about physical deaths and figurative and literal deaths as well. We can talk about that. Because so many of us, I believe now, are living in a state of walking zombies, walking dead, because of the leadership that we've succumbed to, the assessment of character that we don't understand, so much so that even we don't even understand who we are. And I'll just give you an example, then we're going to go to the clip. I'm going to stop. We're going to go to the clip. Even with cannabis. You all know that I support cannabis. And I support cannabis because of the business of the cannabis industry. But we had so many individuals talking about, oh, you shouldn't use recreational cannabis. Oh, you should just stop that. But no one was having a conversation about the FDA just approving a new drug that is 10 times more potent than morphine and 1,000 times more potent than fentanyl. And that's gonna hit the street. Of course, the conversation is, oh no, it's only gonna be used when people are in the hospital for severe pain. Really? Like everything else? And next thing you know, it will be out on the streets. And so why aren't we fighting that animal? But you're talking about cannabis. But then you're not even having the conversations about how to regulate cannabis. You're not even talking about how to regulate the THC levels that produce the high in cannabis versus the medicinal components of cannabis, because we're not educated. And we don't want to have the real conversations. Because in our positions, oh, they're going to use that against you to get a job. They can use anything against you to get a job when it's a job. If you're not in control of your destiny, people can come in and say, and you've seen it, oh, because sisters wear their hair in braids, oh, that doesn't fit our code, I can take your job away. Because men have beards, oh, we don't want you to have beards, I can take your job away. It's not just cannabis, it's whatever their whim is. But if you don't understand those things, if you don't have an understanding of your moral compass, your character, then you will be beheld to anything in any conversation. And then so much so that you'll regurgitate it. That means that you'll give it out to everybody else. You'll go to them like it's gospel and say, oh yes, because A, B, and C. You know it's true. I know you all might not like it this morning, but it's the truth. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the clip. I want you all to think about that. And of course, I'm going to open up the lines after the clip so we can have the real conversations that matter with us this morning. And we'll take it from there. So let's enjoy the clip.
Many politicians are, but we shouldn't be. In moods like this, we need to remember and read the works of Niccolo Machiavelli, a late 15th century political advisor and political theorist who argued that we shouldn't think that politicians are immoral and simply bad for lying and dissembling and manoeuvring. A good politician, in Machiavelli's remarkable view, isn't one who's friendly and honest and kind. It's someone, however occasionally dark and underhand they might be, who knows how to defend, enrich, and bring honor to the state, which is also an extremely important goal. Being nice may well be a virtue in general, but what citizens most need from their rulers is effectiveness, which may well call upon some darker arts. Once we understand this basic requirement, we stand to be less disappointed and clearer about what we want from our politicians. Niccolo Machiavelli was born in Florence in 1469. His father was a lawyer, and so Machiavelli received an extensive formal education and got his first job as a secretary for the city of Florence. But soon after his appointment, Florence exploded politically and expelled the Medici family, who'd ruled it for 60 years, and suffered decades of political instability and turmoil. As a consequence, Machiavelli experienced a series of career reversals. Over just a few decades, he went from being an important diplomat to a semi-successful general to an enemy of the state, tortured and then exiled when the Medici returned to power. Although Machiavelli was rather a failed politician, he can be remembered as a truly great man because of two works he wrote, The Prince and the Discourses. In them, he attends to a central problem of politics then as now, that it's almost impossible to be both a good politician and a good person in the traditional Christian sense. Machiavelli proposed that the overwhelming responsibility of a good prince is to defend the state from external and internal threats to stable governance. This means he must know how to fight, but more importantly, he must know about reputation and the management of those around him. People should neither think he is soft and easy to disobey, nor should they find him so cruel that he disgusts his society. He should seem unapproachably strict, but reasonable. When Machiavelli turned to the question of whether it was better for a prince to be loved or feared, he wrote that while it would theoretically be wonderful for a leader to be both loved and obeyed, a prince should always err on the side of inspiring terror, for this is ultimately what keeps people in check. Machiavelli's Christian contemporaries had suggested that princes should be merciful, peaceful, generous, and tolerant, They thought that being a good politician was, in short, the same as being a good Christian. But Machiavelli argues differently. He asked his readers to dwell on the incompatibility between Christian ethics and good governance, and particularly referred to the case of Girolamo Savonarola. Savonarola was a Dominican friar, a fervent, idealistic Christian who'd briefly come to be the ruler of Florence in 1494. He'd come to power promising to build the city of God on earth in Florence. He'd preached against the excesses and tyranny of the Medici government, and even managed for a few months to lead Florence as a peaceful, democratic, and relatively honest state. However, Savonarola's success could not last, because, in Machiavelli's view, it was based on the weakness that always attends being good in the Christian sense. It was not long before his regime became a threat to the corrupt Pope Alexander, whose henchmen captured and tortured Savonarola, hung him in the centre of Florence, and burnt the body before the eyes of a now vengeful citizenry. This, in Machiavelli's eyes, is what tends to happen to the nice guys in politics. Rather than follow this unfortunate Christian example, Machiavelli suggested that a leader would do well to make judicious use of what he called virtù, virtue. Machiavelli's concept of virtù for politicians involves wisdom, strategy, strength, bravery, and when necessary, ruthlessness. In fact, at one point, Machiavelli uses the deliciously paradoxical phrase criminal virtue to describe the necessary ability of leaders to be cruel in the name of the state and yet still good as leaders. Machiavelli provided some criteria for what constitutes the right occasion for a bit of criminal virtue. Any violence must be strictly necessary for the security of the state. It must be done swiftly, often at night, counselled Machiavelli, and it shouldn't be repeated too often, lest a reputation for mindless brutality builds up. Machiavelli gave the example of his contemporary, Cesare Borgia, whom he admired as someone who knew how to be tough but not too tough, though we might question the criteria Machiavelli used. When Cesare conquered the city of Cesena, he ordered one of his mercenaries, Ramiro de Orco, to bring order to the region, which Ramiro did through swift and brutal ways. Men were beheaded in front of their wives and children, property was seized, traitors were castrated. Cesare then turned on de Orco himself and had him sliced in half and placed in the public square, just to remind the townspeople who the true boss was. But then, as Machiavelli approvingly noted, that was enough bloodshed. Cesare moved on to cut taxes, imported some cheap grain, built a theatre, and organised a series of beautiful festivals to keep people from dwelling on unfortunate memories. The Catholic Church banned Machiavelli's works for 200 years because of the force with which he had argued that being a good Christian was incompatible with being a good leader. But even for atheists and those of us who are not politicians, Machiavelli's insights are important. He writes that we cannot be good at or for all things, not only because of our limited abilities and resources, but also because of conflicts within moral codes. Some of the fields we choose, if not politics, then perhaps business or family life, may require what we evasively call difficult decisions, by which we really mean ethical trade-offs. We may have to sacrifice neo-Christian visions of kindness for the sake of practical effectiveness. We may have to lie in order to keep a relationship afloat. We may have to ignore the feelings of certain employees to keep a business going. And that, insists Machiavelli, is the price of dealing with the world as it is and not as we feel it should be. The world has continued to love and hate Machiavelli in equal measure for insisting on focusing our attention on the uncomfortable tension between two things we love and always want to have together but perhaps can't: effectiveness and niceness.
I appreciate that clip. It was provided by School of Life, and I thought it was most interesting. The author at the end said the two things that we battle with: effectiveness and being nice. So everyone wants you to be nice, but they want you to be effective. Can you get the job done? And then in the midst of being able to get the job done, whatever job done is defined as, you have to deal with all these other issues, these political components. And I thought it was so interesting. Did you catch the notion that the Catholic Church used its power because it didn't like the messaging from Machiavelli, that they banned his book? See what I'm talking about? So if I don't like, because I have the power and I don't like the conversation, instead of just dealing with the conversation, outwardly having the conversation, we can always agree to disagree. Like we talk about on this show, we can agree to disagree. It's no problem. Then you don't have to be mad at me, and I'm never going to be mad at you. And then hopefully in our disagreement, we can learn, because you want to hear and I want to listen, right? Because sometimes we always want to think about what we're going to say as a rebuttal versus me just listening because I want to get an understanding. But at the end of the day, if we don't even understand what it is that we're trying to get an understanding of, then don't you think it's a moot point? And so I'm asking, and callers, I see you. Yeah, I'm about to get you on. What does he talk about? Good politicians and a good person don't go hand in hand. The inclusion of Christianity. That, for some of us, probably has been the downfall with regards to religion and being people of color in these United States of America. That's a different conversation, though. Ethical trade-offs. We should deal with the world as it is versus as it should be. This great democracy, this lady liberty that was created for us to buy into and what we're allegedly, currently, and always striving for, not so much. I'm asking, but that was one of the statements. I'm asking. And so those are the things. That's why I put it out this morning. I'm going to go to the line. I have a couple of other news articles that I want to support the conversation this morning. And so I'm asking you, does character matter? And that's in every aspect. I'm talking, it's in government, it's in your household, it is at your place of work, all of that. Do you look at your team manager? Do you look at your CEO? Do you look at your executive director in any kind of way? Do you look at how they interact with people, deal with people, and then wonder about the business, how the business then is functioning? How does that work with employees and morale and team building and empowerment? Or are we just happy to get a check and we let everything fall by the wayside, as so many of us do? But is it only a component of based on who's managing us? Do we act the same when the person looks like us, if we're black or brown people, versus when the person doesn't? I venture to say in experiences that I've had that we don't. We don't act the same when the manager or the team leader or the supervisor looks like us. Leadership becomes a whole different component versus when they don't. But that's just me as well. So that's just Collette talking right now. It's our Friday time. I'm going to open the lines to you. We're engaging in dialogue. It's our conversations that matter. And so, of course, I want to see what you have to say, all right? So thanks for your patience. Great morning to you. Caller, you there? Oh, I lost you. Oh, no. So are my calls, are my lines acting up this morning? Please call back and so I can make sure I can get you on because I want to hear what you have to say. So in the midst of how to fix government, if indeed we are concerned about leadership, there was a great article, I don't know if you know, the longest sitting dean, our dean, Congressman Representative John Dingell. He wrote a book. It's out now, and he's talking about how to fix government. And specifically, the book is entitled The Dean, the Best Seat in the House. It's a combination biography and critique of the nation's current leadership. And he says that he is really appalled, if you will, of having served after 6 decades, that now the institution of government is reviled by the American people. And so he goes on to give 4 action items that could perhaps change and fix government. And we're going to get there because, it's a great point. Because then do we create items, deliverables to fix something based on what it is under policy and legislation or just an understanding of who people are? Because I believe that if we have an actual compassion, and that goes back to character, if you have a compassion for people and you're supposed to lead, then that creates the policies in which you govern by. If you have a compassion, if you can relate to a group of people, that whether they're your constituents or not, you understand the various levels that people are in this government, in where we are in America, and how these elected officials are supposed to govern them, then you would never say people shouldn't have health care. You would never say that young people shouldn't have adequate education. You would never say that we shouldn't have fair housing. You would just never say those things. It would not be okay if communities are just distraught with inadequate services and poor drinking water and substandard living conditions. You would never say that it is okay, no matter what your socioeconomic status is. You wouldn't say it's okay because you're identifying with the human race, the needs of the people. Because guess what? You'll always be okay if you put the needs of others first, especially if you're in service. Let me just tell you that. You're always going to be okay, no matter what the situation is. You'll always be okay. Because then you have to sit and, I believe, ask yourself, what is it that you're desiring to accomplish? So you want more money. So what do you want more money to do? You want more money because you want to buy a bigger house, you want to buy a bigger car, you want to shop more. What do you need more money to do? Are you creating a legacy for your children? Are you creating college funds? Are you putting a trust together so they can be an entrepreneur? Are you buying up properties and creating your own? I mean, what are you doing if it's about money? Because we've consistently seen examples that money doesn't make people happy. Maybe it creates a comfort level for you because you believe, based on however you were brought up, and you can pay bills on a timelier fashion, and you believe that there's some comfort level in having it. But then what? Because when it's all said and done, it's not about your money. Did you have an impact on someone else's life? Were you able to connect with someone? Were you able to make a difference for someone? Because once our time is up, what are they going to sit and say about you? Well, how are they going to eulogize you? Oh, they had a whole bunch of money. Well, he was sharp. Girl, she was dressed to the teeth all the time. That's it? That's all they're going to say? And then if you're in leadership, did you leave a city better? We always talk about the Honorable Coleman Alexander Young. Always. And it always goes back to how he was committed to the growth of the people in this community. How he understood that you had to have a bustling downtown in order to have a thriving neighborhood. And he created a space where they were both functioning in tandem. And that he fought for the rights of people that didn't look like the quote-unquote majority. And that was his legacy. That was his leadership. It was a content of his character. And to this day, we're still talking about the greatness that he had and has in this city. Do you all get how I was able to put that together? The content of your character. So you can be this person, and I'm not saying that he was not without his humanness, because we're humans, right? We're imperfect people. So whatever that looks like, but he was unapologetically who he is, who he was, and he was committed to making a difference for people that look like him. And telling people that if you didn't want to be a part of it, that you could go on back to wherever you were because it wasn't going to stop it. But nowadays it seems like as we look at leadership, we believe that the only way that we can have leaders is if we defer to them to do everything for us and we're not doing anything for ourselves. I think we forget what Coleman brought to the table, who Coleman told us we could be. And we succumb back to the slave mentality of waiting for someone to do it for you. I'm just asking. The character. And then you get disappointed. You should always be disappointed because you should always know that the governance and the system wasn't made for you. We weren't a part of the Constitution. The Constitution wasn't supposed to be for us. Fair and equal rights. You were considered a human. Stop. So much so that when we are elected into office, we don't even understand how to address the Constitution. You get where I'm going? Let me go to the line and see what you have to say. Thanks for your patience. Good morning to you.
How you doing today?
I'm amazing.
Well, first, you got to give a shout out to TV33,
Sure.
Comcast, Channel 91, WHCS, Detroit Highland Park. Great start to a great show.
Thank you.
Sorry you had the technical difficulties yesterday.
Yeah.
But you fought through like a champ, as you always do. Yesterday, I don't know if you showed the exact same clip.
I did.
But the clip you showed today is the reason, and this is my thing, is the reason why it is so many voters in this country voted for a TV personality. Because one of the funny things is it had nothing to do with the perception of fantasy or reality. It has to do with the mindset of trust. Meaning, I know some people who come from Middle East, the family come from Middle East,
Okay.
that actually voted for Donald Trump.
Right.
And I remember right before the vote, they were just saying, vote for Donald Trump if you believe or you're against abortion, meaning moral majority.
Okay.
Now, there's a lot of Christian Muslims in the metropolitan Detroit area
Okay.
who call themselves Chaldeans.
Okay.
Okay? Now, when you go back to the Caucasoid Mountain, I never did understand that, but now me knowing my history, okay. So, do you know that right after Donald Trump won the election, there were local business owners that got caught up in the ICE rage, and some of them business owners were actually individuals that voted for Donald Trump.
I believe that. You know what? Absolutely. Stay there because we talked about that. There was a segment on 60 Minutes. You all remember that? And there was this small town who was rallying around this diner owner. And absolutely, their family voted for Trump. And next thing you know, the dad was deported. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
No, but the reason why I brought it up was it goes back to the clip.
Okay.
It had to do with character or smarts. People believe in the character of our current president. Now, mind you, he's a TV personality. He's never been part of the military. He's never won the vote before, and he's never worked for the government. But he is the number one politician, and he is the number one person in the government. And it's the symbol of running our country.
So stay there for a minute because
How did he get there?
Still stay there for a minute because you really make a great point, and I really want us to not miss that. You stated that the people who voted for him have fallen into belief of his character. And so I'm asking us on that note, do you even know what his true character is? Because he is an actor. He was a TV personality. So he is astute enough to know what I need to say to evoke emotion, to how to get engagement, to how to keep people watching the show. They're waiting for him to say, you're fired. They were waiting for all these grandiose actions that were going to keep his ratings up so that he could keep generating revenue. So if that is who you believe Donald Trump to be, then to your point, absolutely, it transferred into who you believed him to be as he discussed what his vision was for America. And it was making America great again. And so then you had to ask yourself, as people ask, well, if you're making it again, that means you're trying to repeat a cycle. And so if you're repeating a cycle, what cycle are you repeating? And in that repeating and repetitive nature, who was it good for? Because if you're talking about the privilege of a certain group, white privilege, that wasn't good for people of color. And so if indeed everyone bought into that, because we really didn't have the conversations. I mean, so the truth is, if people said no, it's not about, hold on one second. If the people said no, it's really not about color, I believe that he can make America great again, meaning that America is the powerhouse, that America has the manufacturing, and that we're the business, and that we're controlling the world. And if that's who it is, it's not about us oppressing each other in our borders, within our preview. It is that we want to be the powerhouse of the world again. I don't know. We haven't had that conversation.
Now, I would like for you to think about this.
Sure.
Now, he had a TV show called The Apprentice. What was the purpose of his TV show? He was the boss, and everybody had to prove to be worthy to sit up to work for him.
Yes.
Now, let's go back to that news conference right after the midterm elections. He acted just like, when he's about to fire somebody, he acted the same way during that news conference. That's what's funny, and I don't hear nobody talking about it. I would love for some of your listeners or callers to talk about, if they've seen the show Apprentice, what is their opinion about how he acted after the midterms, and then how he acted around minority newscasters and people he didn't like. This is the President of the United States. You're going to come across people.
Stay there. Why does it even have to be an isolated incident? The essence is, how does he act all the time? But maybe the real truth of it is, it's not about what he does, it's what he's allowed to do. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about then you need to start assessing the character of the other legislators. Because remember, he's one person. This is not a dictatorship. So you have, at that time, a majority House and Senate that were Republicans, and everyone agreed to his buffoonery. You didn't hear them talking about impeaching him. You didn't hear none of that. If it was President Obama, he would have been out. But see, that goes to, and then we're more critical of President Obama even to this day, people of color, than you are of Donald Trump. You don't hear black folks talking bad about Donald Trump. Just like you don't hear black
No,
folks talking bad about Mike Duggan. Just like
no.
you don't hear black folks talking bad about Dan Gilbert. It's the same thing. It's a mentality. We're like the folks. I should pull up that clip from In Django when Samuel Jackson and what's the guy's name, Leonardo DiCaprio, when they were standing there on the steps of the mansion waiting for Jamie Foxx's character and the other gentleman to ride up on the horse. And Samuel Jackson is watching him. He was like, "Boss, see that Negro on a horse. You see him riding a horse, boss? He shouldn't be riding a horse." Like, and Leonardo, and every time he would see him do things as a free man, Leonardo had to calm him down because he was just agitated beyond belief. So we don't allow us to be in the same space as them, quote unquote. And maybe that was to Kim's point yesterday, that we're just white blackface people. That
No.
all we want to
I
do
want
is
to ask you one
aspire to
question.
be like them, and then are more detrimental to each other than they would ever be to us. So please, your last question.
Right now,
Hmm.
it has never been commented that the policies that he's initiated for the last 2 years has negatively affected anywhere in the United States. But one place is Birmingham, Alabama. Now, I know you might know a little bit about this story, but I want you to expand on the story. When he changed the rules of the EPA, he put somebody ahead of the EPA, the Southeastern District. Now, from New York City, it's called a sludge train where human waste was put on a boxcar out of New York, New Jersey. And somehow this boxcar was sitting in the suburb of Birmingham, Alabama. The stink was so bad, people thought it was dead bodies around. Somehow, by Birmingham, Alabama being the major, biggest metropolis in Birmingham and the central area when it comes down to trains and transportation, this box got sit in we'll say the border of Birmingham. When it came down to the state government, federal government trying to figure out how did this box get sat there, it was directly from an appointment of Donald Trump to the southeastern area of the EPA. This guy's right now about to get charged, okay?
You think so?
But they're not really talking about. No, they're about to charge him.
We'll see. We'll see.
But
I mean,
But
stay
this is the
there
first-
for a minute. That's no different than we were just fighting the whole big piece about the Dakotas and the sacred land and the reservoir and the water. And the original people are fighting for that space. Same thing. Now, you had people that came down there, didn't have a problem with it. Donald Trump supported that. He supported the contamination of the water then. What happened to him then? And he supported the groups.
remember when the pipe busted?
And he supported the groups that went against the people, the original people in that area. So I'm just saying, in theory, it sounds good, but at the end of the day, if your character doesn't believe that there's value, and specifically in that group of people, and or you can't make money out of the deal, and or if you're going to make money out of the deal, then I can sacrifice whoever I want. They're the sacrificial lamb. He doesn't care anything about Alabama. Yeah, you can put the waste down there. He figured they're used to it anyway. They don't care. They don't care.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. So you
Well,
said it. We can watch it. I'd love to see to this day Donald Trump. He has created a modern day dictatorship. You all saw that he canceled the G20 summit with Putin. Come on.
Well,
Do you
if
see
you do
what's
your
happening?
history about Adolf Hitler, you'll learn more about not what Donald Trump is doing, but who is ordering what for Donald Trump to do.
Or at the end
The
of the
same
day,
division of races back in Germany is the same thing going on here in the United States.
it's
Exact same
happening.
thing.
It's happening. I told you all. Mein Kampf in 2018 had its highest sales. They came out of reprint. They had to go back and print more. Everything was bought out. Mein Kampf has resurged. That's Hitler's story. Of course, but you all don't get it. See, that's the overlay for the underplay. Do you get it? I'm gonna keep you focused on these superficial things. I'm gonna keep you focused on color. I'm gonna keep you focused on pedigree and race while I'm underlying, controlling, and creating everything else. Because if you realize, if you're power in numbers, if we're poor and all the poor people get together, no matter what your skin color is, you have power. Remember, that goes back to Dr. King's Poor People campaign. So if we can all realize that there's a connection with us outside of our skin color, then they can't control us. But the best way to be able to control us is what? To create a pittance from one group to another. That's no different than this big Thanksgiving thing everybody was hee-hawing about and all that. The truth about Thanksgiving was a genocide of a group of people. Y'all don't get that? But we are hee-hawing about eating. Man, you eat every day. You eat the same thing on Sunday. Stop it. But at the end of the day, all he has to do is change the narrative on anything, and then we just jump right on into it. And we don't even question the character of what Thanksgiving was about.
Wow. Well, thank you for bringing that point, because you know I'm colorblind, and you just brought a great
I'm glad
point.
you are colorblind.
No, I'm glad. Well, I don't judge the people; I judge the person.
Yeah.
And I treat everybody as a child of God until they can reason not to.
Yeah.
That works for me.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I can't speak for the
problems.
next person.
No problems. Yeah, no problems.
Well, thank you so much.
No
Because
problem.
you know there's power in numbers,
Sure.
and if the numbers are not looking at each other, they become a force, especially in a racial society.
Well, we'll see
Thank
if
you
we
so
ever
much for your
realize
show,
that.
Sharon.
I appreciate you. Everyone, we're
Have an
about to go
amazing
to
day.
break. Have an amazing day. All the lines are lit. I'm going to get to all of you as soon as we come back. This is the conversation we need to have. And we're going to deal truthfully with what it is. And so, character, to me, matters in everything. But it's just about who you are as a person. But don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. I'm going to get all the calls in. We're going to start off at the top of the hour. And then it's Freestyle Friday as well. So I'm going to let you talk about whatever you want to talk about, too. Because, we're better together. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.